Stranger, and my issue is carbon emissions. So, what is the carbon emissions issue? Really, it's about a lot of carbon dioxide being released into the atmosphere due to human causes like greenhouse gases from energy generation and other things. And this carbon dioxide has caused climate change and increasing global temperature with the greenhouse effect. Some of the major consequences are since pre industrial times, the global temperature has risen by over zero point 0.8 degrees. The ocean acidification has increased by over 30%, and a third of the Arctic summer ice has disappeared. Uh, and these not changes aren't necessarily just due to the carbon emissions, but they definitely carbon emissions has been identified as a strong reason why, and something that if it is not addressed, these problems will continue to grow. Along with that, there's also extreme weather has also increased due to the change in the Earth's atmosphere, and also more UVA radiation exposure as these rays are being trapped within the Earth's atmosphere. And then the people who are hurt the most by this are people in coastal lands, as the ice caps melting causes sea level rise, which can flood their land and make it uninhabitable. Along with that, extreme weather often kind of comes in the form of hurricanes and flash floods and different things like that, which can also affect the people in coastal lands very negatively. Uh, People in high carbon emissions areas are also hurt a lot when there's a high concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. It can cause like health and breathing problems if it is not identified and addressed. Uh, when it comes to kind of ways to solve this problem, first I really kind of have ideas for a short-term solution. These are kind of the best ways to reduce carbon emission very quickly and kind of very right away, and then as much as possible right away. And I feel like these types of actions should be taken on a local, state, regional, and like country level, basically everything below global, because these smaller levels of government can push through policy faster due to the fact that they kind of have to get the agreement of less people, and less different ideas are usually within their domain of governance. And because of that, they can also kind of individualize or like customize the policies that they're passing to the region that they're governing so that they know it's acceptable to people, but also is able to kind of most effectively reduce emission within their area. And this has already been shown to be effective in different U.S. states. Wisconsin has passed an executive order for carbon-free electricity by 2050, and New York has passed a law for net zero emissions by 2050. Along with kind of government action, I think something else that is needed is kind of raising of individuals' awareness for the emissions cost of their actions, because people kind of sometimes want to help with this problem, but a lot of times they don't know like how they can help and kind of how their actions really affect, contribute, or kind of can help. And one of the ways to do that is kind of by putting carbon emissions labels on products that kind of say how much carbon emissions was the cost of like making this product. Through the purchase. And so this way, kind of consumers will have an idea of how their purchases affect all these things, and businesses will try to kind of reduce the emissions cost of their products in order to make their products more attractive. This type of policy definitely could be implemented on a national level through the country's environmental agency or department, where they just kind of put it as an extension to their current emissions tracking and labeling protocols currently. In addition, along with that, I think that an introduction of a carbon emissions app would very much help. It would kind of educate people, where they could kind of look up different actions they could take, like driving a car a certain amount of miles, or increasing the heating of their house to certain degrees, and see how much emissions that's really the cost of. So they're just a bit more conscious of how their actions affect this issue in the environment. And when it comes to a long-term solution, I think the long-term solution really is a global policy that causes the world to reach net zero overall emissions. And I think to start off, before even kind of creating the policy, the main thing is you got to make sure that you can generate support from all the countries involved. As without participation from almost like basically an agreement from all countries around the world, this policy probably would not be able to be passed as strongly as it would need to be. And so, in order for that to be done, you kind of have to make people within those countries aware of this problem and want to solve it in order to make the countries want to solve this on a global level. And that can be done through individual speeches, books, and medias, kind of informing and educating people on what this issue is, and also NGO campaigns and events, which also educate people and also kind of also pressure the government into taking some sort of action. And I think that after enough support is really raised for this issue, at that point you can kind of adopt a strong emissions policy. Strong emissions policy can be adopted by the world, which would kind of ideally kind of mandate countries, businesses, and cities to be net zero by a certain date, popular one is 2050. But just a certain deadline I think is very important, and kind of to also strongly enforce like the deadline and maybe a different kind of checkpoints that go along the way. And if countries violate them, kind of hit them with penalties and even sanctions for very strong violations. An additional thing that I think should be included in the plan is clean development mechanisms, which are basically investments in carbon-free energy for developing countries, as developing countries can kind of be hurt by emissions restrictions more than developed countries. So, in order to kind of ensure that they keep an economic growth, this type of investment is a really good way to kind of reduce environmental injustice caused by a strong emissions policy. Okay, so that really is the carbon emissions issue and the approaches that I feel best address it in both the short term and the long term.